She vanished during practice. No warning, no trace. What was hidden beneath the bleachers for years finally came to light. This is the story of secrets, silence, and a truth too dark to ignore. You won't want to miss this story. But before we dive in, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a video like this one. I remember that day so clearly, as if the sun itself had paused to watch the moment unravel. It was a warm spring afternoon, the kind where the air was thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and the faint hum of distant traffic, and the gym was alive with the echo of sneakers pounding the polished floor. Brianna was radiant. That day, her energy electric, her smile wide as she spun through the air, catching the light like she was made of sunlight itself. I stood nearby, clapping and cheering, my heart light with the easy joy that comes from being young and reckless and believing the world will always stay this way. But then, just as practice was winding down, everything shifted. Brianna took a break, wiping the sweat from her brow, her laughter still ringing in the air, and then she slipped away into the shadows beneath the bleachers. Or so it seemed. I thought she was just hiding, playing a prank like she often did, but when I looked again, she was gone. The gym, once buzzing with life, felt suddenly vast and hollow, like a stage after the final act when the actors have left but the silence lingers. I called her name, my voice trembling and uncertain, hoping it was all just a trick of the light, that she'd jump out and laugh and tell me I'd been fooled. But no answer came, just the rustle of the wind through the open doors and the creak of the bleachers settling after years of use. The other girls noticed too, their faces falling as the reality sank and Brianna was nowhere to be found. We searched the locker rooms, the parking lot, even the nearby woods, where we sometimes practiced stunts. But the only trace left behind was a sudden void, a silence that swallowed her whole. The coaches tried to keep calm, but their strained voices betrayed the fear creeping through their veins. The police were called, questions asked, and the gym became a crime scene overnight, a place of whispered theories and anxious glances. I stayed close to Brianna's belongings, clutching her water bottle and the cheer shoes she'd kicked off in the corner, hoping desperately for a sign that she'd return. Days passed, and the news spread like wildfire, but the missing girl was still a ghost, a name whispered in shock and sorrow at every school hallway and neighborhood barbecue. The cheer team, once a tight-knit group bound by trust and friendship, fractured under the weight of uncertainty and grief. The silence was deafening, filled with what-ifs and the unbearable ache of unanswered questions. Even now, when I close my eyes, I see her there, just on the edge of the bleachers, where the light meets the shadows, waiting to be found again. That last routine was supposed to be another day, another practice, but it became the moment everything changed when laughter died and a community's hope hung by a thread. It's a memory that haunts me, a fracture in time that refuses to heal, and a reminder that some disappearances don't just steal a person, they steal a piece of all of us. The day after Brianna vanished, the silence hit hardest when I opened the locker room, expecting to see the usual burst of color and chaos. Backpacks thrown open, shoes tossed aside, uniforms hanging in haphazard piles. But all I found was an empty echo. Her locker stood out, a solemn reminder that she never returned, its door slightly ajar like a frozen invitation to a mystery no one dared solve. I reached out hesitantly and touched her cheer bag, its cold canvas still resting on the bench, the straps twisted and dusted with forgotten hopes. It was as if she had left in a hurry, abandoning the things that usually marked her day, a water bottle half full, a folded sweatshirt, the glittering pom-poms that caught the light but held none of her spark. My fingers brushed over the fabric, and the chill ran deeper than the locker's metal walls. It was the first real crack in the facade that she might come back, the first knot of fear tightening and twisting in my gut. Around me, the room buzzed with whispers, teammates speculating, coaches whispering reassurances that felt hollow, the air thick with the weight of what hadn't been said out loud. I tried to push away the creeping dread, telling myself that maybe she'd just gone home early, that it was a mistake, a prank, something explainable. But the stillness of that locker, the way her things sat untouched and waiting, screamed otherwise. The absence was more than physical. It was a presence, a void that swallowed the usual warmth of her laughter and energy. I could almost hear the ghost of her footsteps lingering between the rows, the soft rustle of fabric, the quick intake of breath before a jump or a cheer. I kept staring at the cheer bag, willing it to give me a sign, a clue, anything that might lead me to her. The colors faded in the fading light of the gym, the vibrant reds and whites muted into shades of gray, and the bag seemed to absorb the sorrow of the entire team, a symbol of the gap she left behind. It wasn't just a locker or a bag, it was the last tangible connection to Brianna, a frozen snapshot of a life abruptly paused. I left the room reluctantly, the image of that empty locker etched into my mind, a quiet monument to the day everything shifted. Each time I walked past it after that, the fear came back, sharp and unwelcome, a reminder that she wasn't just missing from practice, she was missing from our lives, from every moment that followed. And with every tick of the clock, the question that haunted me grew louder. Where had she gone? And why had she left her world behind without a trace? The next day, stepping into the gym felt like entering a place suspended in time, where the usual hum of energy and laughter had been replaced by an oppressive silence that seemed to cling to the walls and floors like a thick fog. The polished hardwood gleamed under the harsh, fluorescent lights, but there was no sparkle in the eyes of the students or the staff. Coaches moved in hushed clusters, their voices low and urgent, exchanging fragmented updates and worried glances while trying to mask their own fear with practiced professionalism. The cheer team gathered silently in a corner, their uniforms crisp, but their faces pale and tight with disbelief. Every now and then, someone would catch my eye, a quick flicker of sorrow, or the unspoken question hanging heavy between us. How could Brianna just vanish? The tension was palpable, a living thing that filled the space and refused to let go. As the search began, the school's janitors and volunteers started sweeping the gym floor with flashlights, their beams piercing the shadows in a slow, methodical rhythm, as if the darkness itself might be hiding answers beneath the surface. Everyone's attention eventually turned toward the bleachers, those looming rows of metal and plastic seats that had witnessed countless games, practices, and celebrations. But now they seemed almost sinister, like a yawning mouth ready to swallow anyone who dared get too close. The air around the bleachers was cooler, heavier, as if the shadows there absorbed the warmth and light from the rest of the gym. Nobody wanted to be the first to suggest looking underneath them. It was the last place anyone thought to look because it felt wrong, dangerous, like disturbing something meant to stay hidden. Yet as time dragged on, the whispers grew louder, and more people gathered near the bleachers, their voices carrying a mixture of hope and dread. I joined the small group, peering underneath, crouching low to catch a glimpse of the dark space between the supports. The darkness seemed endless, a black pit swallowing everything beneath those cold, unforgiving seats. I imagined the last moments before Brianna disappeared, her laughter echoing, the flip of her ponytail, the rhythmic clack of her sneakers, and then a sudden silence that swallowed her whole. I felt a shiver run through me, the brush of cold air that seemed to come from the depths beneath the gym floor. The bleachers held their secrets tight, and as the searchers slid flashlights under the seats, The flickering beams revealed nothing but dust, scattered paper, and long-forgotten debris. It was as if the shadows were mocking us, offering the barest hint of presence before retreating into their impenetrable fortress. I swallowed hard, my throat dry with fear and frustration. The gym, once a place of joy and camaraderie, had turned into a silent tomb of unanswered questions. And beneath those metal seats, I could feel a darkness that refused to release its hold on the truth, waiting for someone brave or desperate enough to uncover what had been buried in its depths. Weeks after Brianna disappeared, the gym was already starting to feel like a place frozen in time, a haunting monument to the day everything changed. But the buzz of renovations finally brought a flicker of movement back to those silent walls. I was there when the janitor, a quiet man who usually worked unnoticed, called out with a mixture of surprise and something darker in his voice. He'd discovered a loose panel beneath the bleachers, something hidden and overlooked for who knows how long, and curiosity had pushed him to pull it free, despite the dust that billowed out like a forgotten sigh from the shadows. Peering into the crawl space, the flashlight revealed a narrow, cramped passage filled with years of neglect. Webs hanging like brittle curtains, layers of dust thick enough to catch on your skin, and the stale, heavy scent of a place sealed off from the world. But what made my heart stop was not just the forgotten nature of the space, but the faint glint of something lying just beyond reach, an object half buried in the dirt and shadows that seemed impossibly out of place. As the janitor edged closer and pulled the item free, the room seemed to hold its breath. It was a small, worn cheer bow, the kind Brianna always wore, clipped to her hair. Faded but unmistakable, its ribbons frayed like the edges of our fraying hope. That bow carried with it the weight of 1,000 unanswered questions, each thread a silent witness to the moments before Brianna vanished. The discovery sent a shudder through me, a mix of grief and a flicker of hope so sharp it felt like a knife against my ribs. That hidden space beneath the bleachers was no longer just forgotten, it was a secret vault, a shadowed chamber that held pieces of Brianna's story. Pieces that had been locked away beneath the very place she had last been seen alive. The janitor's hands trembled as he lifted a dusty box from the corner of the crawl space, revealing old notebooks, a cracked photograph, and a pair of scuffed sneakers smaller than mine, but filled with the echo of a life paused too soon. Each item felt like a breadcrumb trail laid down in silence, waiting for someone brave enough to follow. I traced the lines of the photograph with trembling fingers, the faces blurred but the familiar backdrop unmistakable. The cheer gym, the same place that now felt haunted by the ghosts of the past. I could almost hear Brianna's laughter in the stillness, a soft, distant echo threading through the dust motes dancing in the slanting light. The crawl space, once a mere shadow beneath the bleachers, had become a doorway to a truth that refused to stay buried. As the gym filled with workers and investigators, the air thick with murmurs and the hum of flashing cameras, I felt the weight of the moment settle over me. This wasn't just a discovery, it was a reckoning, and for the first time since that day, it felt like the silence might finally be broken. The cramped crawl space beneath the bleachers, which had once seemed like just a forgotten corner of the gym, turned into a chilling capsule of Brianna's last moments, filled with pieces of a life abruptly halted and carefully hidden away. As I sifted through the dust-covered remnants, my fingers trembling against the brittle edges of a cracked phone, I felt the weight of the silence that had swallowed years of unanswered questions. The phone was battered and faded, the screen cracked like shattered glass, and it held no recent calls or messages, only a ghostly reminder of a connection severed too soon. Beside it lay a torn cheer uniform, the fabric ripped and stained, the bright colors dulled by years spent in darkness, and as I picked it up, the scent of old sweat and mildew clung to it like a whisper of the past no one wanted to remember. Most haunting of all was the diary, its cover worn and pages unevenly torn, as if someone had tried to hide the words written inside, to erase the truth Brianna had so desperately tried to capture. The missing pages left jagged gaps in her story, blank spaces where her voice had been silenced, and I felt my heart break again, knowing those lost words might have held the answers that had eluded us for so long. I imagined Brianna clutching that diary, pouring out her fears and hopes in ink, only to have parts of her story wrenched away, leaving behind a puzzle incomplete and aching with loss. The fragments were more than forgotten objects. They were a message, a plea for someone to remember, to find, and to understand. The crawl space, once hidden beneath layers of dust and neglect, had become a silent testament to the erasure of a young life, the desperate attempt to wipe away not just a girl, but the memories she left behind. Every item I touched was a thread connecting me to Brianna's last days, and as I sat surrounded by the broken pieces, I felt a surge of determination rise within me. This forgotten evidence was not just a collection of lost things. It was a call to action, a beacon shining through the years of darkness and silence. The weight of it all settled on my shoulders, heavy but resolute, and I knew that the secrets hidden in that crawl space would change everything, rekindle the search, shatter the silence, and finally bring to light the truth that had been buried for far too long. There was no turning back. The past had clawed its way out from beneath the bleachers, demanding justice and remembrance, and I was ready to follow wherever it might lead. The hallways of the school felt different after Brianna vanished, as if the very walls held their breath, heavy with secrets no one dared to speak aloud. Rumors crept like shadows, whispered in hushed tones between classes, growing darker with each retelling. There was talk of a figure who prowled the corridors late at night, a presence felt but rarely seen, slipping past locked doors and disappearing into the silence. Some said teachers exchanged knowing looks, their eyes flickering with unspoken warnings, while others claimed to hear footsteps echoing where no one should be. I tried to anchor myself in hope, clinging to memories of Brianna's laughter and the bright energy she brought to the gym. But the creeping darkness made it harder each day to believe she was still out there somewhere waiting to be found. The whispers weren't just idle gossip. They felt like pieces of a puzzle, scattered fragments of truth buried beneath layers of fear and denial. I found myself listening for every subtle shift in the quiet, every unexpected sound that might hint at what really happened, but the more I searched, the more the school seemed to close in, hiding its secrets behind locked doors and watchful eyes. The hallways became a maze of uncertainty, the familiar places now tainted with suspicion, and even the cheer squad, once a place of friendship and joy, was shadowed by tension and guarded glances. I saw the fear etched on the faces of other students, the way they avoided certain corners or hurried past doors they once lingered by. It was as if the school itself was haunted by something more than loss, a lingering presence that refused to be acknowledged, but whispered in every creak of the floorboards, in every flicker of the fluorescent lights. I felt isolated, caught between wanting to scream the truth and fearing the consequences of digging too deep. Yet, despite the weight of those whispered rumors, I couldn't turn away. Brianna's absence was a wound in the heart of the school, and I was determined to uncover whatever lay beneath the surface, no matter how unsettling the truth might be. The shadows lengthened, and with them, the urgency to find answers grew, fueled by the quiet hope that if I could unravel the whispers, I could bring light to the darkness and finally honor the friend whose disappearance had broken us all. I can still remember the first time I saw that old security tape, how the grainy black and white flicker on the screen seemed to breathe life into the silence that had settled over Brianna's disappearance. The gym was dark and empty, shadows stretching across the polished floors, the only sound, the faint hum of the camera's static whispering through the speakers. Most of the footage was nothing but static, blurry, flickering, broken by interference, but then, in one brief, chilling moment, the grain shifted to reveal something that stopped my heart. Cold, a figure. Not the friendly faces of teammates or coaches, but someone unknown, lurking just beyond the edge of the bleachers where Brianna had last been seen. The figure was tall, their shape barely more than a silhouette against the faint glow of the emergency exit sign. But there was something unmistakably deliberate in the way they moved, slow and careful, as if they belonged to the shadows themselves. No one recognized that person. The footage was too unclear to make out a face or features, but their presence felt like a silent accusation, a reminder that the truth had been watching, waiting in plain sight all along. I rewound and replayed that clip over and over, each time hoping for more, a clearer image, a recognizable gesture, a hint of motive, but the tape refused to give up its secrets. The static hissed like a ghost, masking the story beneath layers of decay and time. I thought about Brianna, that bright, fearless girl, who never deserved to be erased like a bad memory, and I felt a fierce surge of anger mixed with sorrow. Who was this shadowy figure, and what had they done? Why had no one told us, or even noticed, their presence in that cold, unforgiving moment? The gym, once a place of laughter and camaraderie, now seemed haunted by that silent watcher, a grim reminder that the pieces of Brianna's story were scattered in places we hadn't dared to look. That broken tape became a symbol for me, not just evidence, but a beacon calling me to keep digging, to keep searching through the noise and silence, until I uncovered the whole truth. Every night, I sat with that flickering image, feeling the weight of 1,000 questions pressing on my chest, knowing that somewhere beyond the static was the answer I needed. It was as if the past was reaching out, asking me to remember what had been hidden, to confront the shadows and bring Brianna's story into the light. The broken tape wasn't just a relic of a night lost to fear. It was a thread, pulling me deeper into a mystery that refused to be forgotten. And I was ready to follow it, wherever it led. I remember the day my phone buzzed with a message from Emily, a classmate I hadn't spoken to in years, but who carried a piece of Brianna's story that no one else seemed to know. Her words were hesitant at first, like she was tiptoeing around a memory too heavy to share. But the urgency beneath her tone was unmistakable, a secret she'd held onto in silence until now. She told me about a conversation she'd overheard late one night, just days before Brianna disappeared. A whispered exchange between Brianna and someone we never suspected, hidden away in the quiet shadows of the school halls. There had been talk of something dark beneath the polished surface of our perfect school, a festering secret that no one dared to name aloud. Emily described how Brianna had sent a late-night message to her phone, short and cryptic, filled with fear and warning. The words lingered like a ghost. If anything happens to me, look under the bleachers. They're watching. I sat with those words for hours, turning them over like a fragile stone in my hands, the weight of what they implied sinking deep into my chest. It was the kind of message that shattered the illusion of safety we'd all clung to, the idea that our school was just a place of learning, laughter, and friendship. Instead, it whispered of shadows lurking where we never thought to look, of secrets buried beneath the cheer routines and pep rallies, hidden in the dark corners where no one dared to shine a light. I felt a chill run down my spine, imagining Brianna alone with that fear, trying to send a signal, to leave a breadcrumb trail in case she vanished. It was a silent scream encoded in a text, a desperate attempt to be heard before everything went quiet. I reached out to Emily for more details, piecing together fragments of memory and half-remembered conversations from other classmates, each adding another layer to the dark tapestry that seemed to surround Brianna's final days. There were rumors of a strange man seen near the gym after hours, whispers of threats and warnings Brianna had confided only to a trusted few. Each new detail deepened the mystery, pulling me further into a world of secrets I wished I had never uncovered but could no longer ignore. That message, those whispered warnings, became a beacon in the darkness, a fragile thread connecting Brianna's disappearance to something bigger, something dangerous that had been hidden beneath the cheer, smiles, and school spirit all along. I knew then that finding the truth meant following those threads wherever they led, no matter how painful or frightening the journey might be. Brianna had tried to tell us something in her last moments, and I was determined to listen to find what they were watching, to uncover what was hidden, and to bring her story out of the shadows once and for all. I remember the moment I stood face to face with the person who had been lurking in the shadows around Brianna's last days, a figure who had haunted the edges of our lives with silence and menace. The air between us felt electric, thick with tension, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting to see what would break first, the calm facade or the heavy truth pressing down on us both. I could see the flicker of recognition in their eyes, a mixture of defiance and something like regret. But when I spoke, voice, steady, yet trembling with the weight of years lost, their silence was deafening, a wall built of stone that refused to crumble. I pressed, asking about Brianna, about what had happened that day, hoping for a crack in the armor, a glimpse of remorse, or an explanation to piece together the fractured story. But all I got was a cold, hard gaze that told me more than any words could, that the truth was locked away, buried deep, where no one could reach it. It was like chasing smoke. Every lead I thought I had, every shadow I believed I was grasping, slipped through my fingers just when I thought I'd hold on. The silence felt like a betrayal, sharper than any confession. A reminder of how much power words hold, and how devastating their absence can be. I thought about Brianna, her bright smile, the way she moved through the world with an energy that filled the room, and I couldn't reconcile that light with the darkness cloaking this moment. My questions echoed in the room, unanswered, a litany of pain and frustration that seemed to hang in the air long after we parted ways. That confrontation was a crossroads, a moment charged with possibility, yet marked by defeat. A reminder that sometimes the hardest battles are fought against silence itself. I walked away feeling hollow but more determined than ever, knowing that the missing pieces of Brianna's story were out there, waiting to be found, even if those who held them refused to speak. It was a painful lesson in the limits of truth and the cruelty of secrets kept too long, but it also fueled a fire inside me, a relentless drive to uncover what had been hidden, to bring light to the shadows, and to honor Brianna's memory by refusing to let silence win. The journey was far from over, and even as the pieces slipped further away in that room, I vowed to keep chasing them, no matter how long it took, because some stories deserve to be heard, and some voices must never be silenced. After weeks of sifting through every corner of the gym and its surroundings, we stumbled upon a discovery that shifted the entire investigation, a false wall hidden in the far end of the locker room, cleverly built to evade casual notice. My heart raced as we pried it open, revealing a small, claustrophobic room cloaked in shadows, the stale air heavy with secrets long kept. The floor was littered with torn papers, photographs, and scraps of clothing that had once belonged to Brianna and others who had vanished before her. There were notebooks filled with frantic scrawls, names crossed out and rewritten, dates marking days of captivity and silence. It felt like stepping into a crypt of memories, each object a silent scream begging to be heard. My fingers trembled as I touched a faded cheer bow, its once bright colors dulled by dust but unmistakably hers. The walls bore faint handprints and scratches, desperate attempts to mark time, to hold on to sanity. In the corner, a makeshift bed made from threadbare blankets and a broken chair spoke of long, lonely nights. The more I explored, the more the room rewrote everything I thought I knew about Brianna's disappearance and the twisted web of secrets the school had harbored. It was clear now this was no isolated incident, but a place of confinement, fear, and silenced cries. The room was a brutal, heartbreaking testimony to what had happened behind the closed doors of a place meant to nurture and protect, but which had instead hidden darkness beneath its bright lights. Standing there, I felt a crushing mix of sorrow, rage, and resolve. We weren't just uncovering evidence, we were reclaiming stolen stories, shining light into the shadows where truth had been buried. And this hidden room was just the beginning. The moment she stepped forward, the room seemed to hold its breath, the weight of years pressing down as a fragile but unbreakable voice emerged from the shadows, a girl who had endured the unthinkable and somehow found the strength to escape the nightmare that had stolen so many others like Brianna. She was younger than I expected, but her eyes held a depth carved by pain and resilience, a fire that refused to be extinguished despite everything she had faced. When she spoke, her words tumbled out raw and unfiltered, cutting through the silence that had protected the predator for too long. She recounted the chilling details with a quiet courage that was both heartbreaking and fierce, the way the Bleachers concealed a hidden prison, the whispered threats that silenced screams, the friends who vanished, and the secrets too heavy to carry alone. Her story wove a tapestry of fear, hope, and survival, shining light on the dark corners where lies had thrived and justice had been denied. I could see the toll it had taken on her, the trembling hands, the quick breaths, the moments when tears threatened to break free, but also the determination etched on her face, a determination to speak not just for herself, but for all who had been silenced. Listening to her, I felt a surge of emotions, sorrow for the years stolen from her, admiration for her bravery, and a burning desire to see this story reach the ears it needed to reach. Her voice opened wounds that had scabbed over with neglect and fear, but it also began the healing process, giving others the courage to come forward and break their own silence. I watched as survivors gathered strength from her testimony, as families found hope where there had been despair, and as a community faced the painful truth it had long avoided. It was clear that this was more than a confession. It was a call to action, a rallying cry that echoed far beyond the walls of that room. In that moment, I understood that her courage was the key that would unlock the door to justice, that the shadows that once hid our pain were beginning to recede. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but with her voice leading the way, we were no longer walking in darkness. As I stood there, surrounded by the quiet stirrings of change, I felt a profound gratitude for the girl who dared to speak, for the truth that refused to be buried, and for the fragile but undeniable hope that justice might finally be within reach. The reckoning came slowly, like the tide creeping over the shore, unstoppable once it gathered momentum, forcing everyone to face the uncomfortable truths that had been buried beneath years of silence and denial. The school, once a place of laughter and cheers, became a battleground of whispers and confrontations as the truth exploded into the light, shattering the fragile facades that had protected the predator and suffocated the victims. I watched as the community, long complicit in its quiet complicity, struggled to reconcile the image they had held with the dark reality uncovered beneath the bleachers and behind closed doors. Parents who once spoke only in hushed tones now demanded answers, their voices shaking with a mixture of anger, guilt, and grief. Teachers and administrators who had once turned away from uncomfortable questions found themselves scrutinized, their silence and inaction laid bare like a stain that could not be washed away. The predator, no longer hidden by shadows or secrecy, faced a mounting wave of accusations and outrage, the walls that had once shielded him crumbling under the weight of public condemnation and legal pursuit. The media descended, their cameras and microphones capturing every tear, every defiant statement, every plea for justice that echoed through the halls and streets. It was a reckoning not just for the individual responsible, but for a system that had failed to protect its most vulnerable. A society forced to confront the ways silence and fear had allowed evil to fester, unchecked. Survivors found strength in their shared pain, their voices rising together in a chorus demanding change and accountability, refusing to be silenced again. I felt the immense power of this moment, the catharsis of truth unleashed, and the collective will to transform sorrow into action. But I also sensed the heavy burden of what lay ahead, the slow, painful process of healing and rebuilding trust. The reckoning was not just about punishment. It was about restoring a community fractured by betrayal and fear, about creating a space where safety and honesty could take root. As I stood among the crowd, I realized that this confrontation was the culmination of years of quiet suffering and unseen battles. The reckoning forced us all to look in the mirror and see not only the darkness, but also the light of resilience and hope that flickered despite it. It was a turning point, a moment when silence was broken, shadows fled, and the promise of justice began to take shape. Though the wounds were deep and the scars would remain, the reckoning marked the beginning of a new chapter where truth held power and no one could hide behind lies again. Brianna's memory became more than just a shadow of loss. It transformed into a powerful rallying cry that echoed through the halls of the school and the hearts of those who had been silenced for too long. I watched as survivors, once isolated and burdened by pain, found a fragile but unbreakable strength in one another, their shared experiences weaving a tapestry of resilience and hope that no darkness could unravel. The gym, which had once been a silent witness to secrets and sorrow, began to breathe anew with the energy of healing, its walls absorbing the courage of voices raised in unison against the fear that had long held them captive. Meetings were held, support groups formed, and the community started to confront not only the past, but the very systems that had allowed such horrors to go unnoticed. I could see the transformation ripple outward. Teachers who once avoided the subject now became advocates. Parents who had turned away now demanded accountability, and students who had suffered in silence now stood together, their courage a beacon for others, still finding their voices. Brianna's story, painful and raw, no longer belonged solely to those who mourned her. It belonged to all of us who refused to let her disappearance define our future. I felt the weight of that shift every time I stepped into the gym, the air lighter, charged with the quiet but relentless determination of people choosing hope over despair. The space that had hidden shadows was now filled with light, where murals were painted not just of memories, but of strength, and where every cheer, every practice, became an act of defiance against the past. I heard stories of healing, of survivors reclaiming their lives, finding purpose beyond pain, and I understood that the journey was far from over, but that the first steps had been taken with a courage born from love and loss. The healing was messy, slow, and often painful fractured trust could not be mended overnight, and scars ran deep, but it was real and undeniable. There were moments of doubt and anger, setbacks that threatened to pull us back into silence, yet the collective will to heal pressed forward, fueled by the memory of Brianna and the hope for a safer tomorrow. I found solace in knowing that from the depths of tragedy, something vital had emerged. A community unwilling to forget, unwilling to accept silence as an answer, and determined to rewrite the story with truth and compassion. As days turned into months, the gym no longer felt like a place of secrets, but a sanctuary of resilience where the past was acknowledged, the present was embraced, and the future was fought for with open hearts. Brianna's legacy was no longer a symbol of what was lost, but a beacon guiding us toward justice, healing, and the unyielding power of the human spirit to rise, even when the world seems darkest. Brianna's memory became more than just a shadow of loss. It transformed into a powerful rallying cry that echoed through the halls of the school and the hearts of those who had been silenced for too long. I watched as survivors, once isolated and burdened by pain, found a fragile but unbreakable strength in one another, their shared experiences weaving a tapestry of resilience and hope that no darkness could unravel. The gym, which had once been a silent witness to secrets and sorrow, began to breathe anew with the energy of healing, its walls absorbing the courage of voices raised in unison against the fear that had long held them captive. Meetings were held, support groups formed, and the community started to confront not only the past, but the very systems that had allowed such horrors to go unnoticed. I could see the transformation ripple outward. Teachers who once avoided the subject now became advocates. Parents who had turned away now demanded accountability, and students who had suffered in silence now stood together, their courage a beacon for others, still finding their voices. Brianna's story, painful and raw, no longer belonged solely to those who mourned her. It belonged to all of us who refused to let her disappearance define our future. I felt the weight of that shift every time I stepped into the gym, the air lighter, charged with the quiet but relentless determination of people choosing hope over despair. The space that had hidden shadows was now filled with light, where murals were painted not just of memories, but of strength, and where every cheer, every practice, became an act of defiance against the past. I heard stories of healing, of survivors reclaiming their lives, finding purpose beyond pain, and I understood that the journey was far from over, but that the first steps had been taken with a courage born from love and loss. The healing was messy, slow, and often painful. Fractured trust could not be mended overnight, and scars ran deep, but it was real and undeniable. There were moments of doubt and anger, setbacks that threatened to pull us back into silence, yet the collective will to heal pressed forward, fueled by the memory of Brianna and the hope for a safer tomorrow. I found solace in knowing that from the depths of tragedy, something vital had emerged. A community unwilling to forget, unwilling to accept silence as an answer, and determined to rewrite the story with truth and compassion. As days turned into months, the gym no longer felt like a place of secrets, but a sanctuary of resilience where the past was acknowledged, the present was embraced, and the future was fought for with open hearts. Brianna's legacy was no longer a symbol of what was lost, but a beacon guiding us toward justice, healing, and the unyielding power of the human spirit to rise, even when the world seems darkest. Years have passed since that harrowing day when Brianna disappeared beneath the bright lights of the gym, yet the memory lingers like a shadow that refuses to fade. Standing here now with her family and friends, gathered beneath the very bleachers that once concealed so many secrets, I feel the weight of those years settle around us like the dust that has finally begun to clear. The air is heavy with a mix of grief and resolve, voices low and steady as we share stories of Brianna, her laughter, her fierce spirit, the light she carried even in the darkest moments. The memorial is simple, but powerful. A stone plaque etched with her name, surrounded by flowers, candles, and tokens of remembrance left by those who never gave up hope. As I look around, I see faces weathered by sorrow, but strengthened by the journey we have all been forced to endure. A community forever changed, but also united in the unyielding commitment to honor her memory. It strikes me that this gathering is more than a ceremony. It is a reclaiming of space, a defiant act against the silence that once tried to erase her existence. The echoes of Brianna's story resonate beyond these walls, reaching into every corner of our town and reminding us all that courage can grow even in the harshest soil. I think about the survivors who have come forward, their voices now part of a chorus that will not be silenced, their strength a beacon for others still trapped in the shadows of fear. There is a raw beauty in this healing, a collective breath finally released after holding so much pain for so long. Memories that once brought tears now bring a quiet pride, proof that even the deepest wounds can begin to mend with truth and solidarity. Yet, amid the healing, the scars remain visible, a reminder that justice is not a destination, but a journey, ongoing and necessary. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the memorial, I feel a surge of hope. Brianna's story, once buried beneath layers of dust and fear, has become a catalyst for change, a symbol of resilience that challenges us to confront uncomfortable truths and fight for a safer future. In this moment, standing shoulder to shoulder with those who loved her most, I understand that while the dust settles on the past, the echoes of her courage will never be forgotten. They will ripple through time, inspiring generations to listen, to believe, and to act. And though Brianna is no longer here with us, her spirit lives on, etched not just in stone but in every heart that refuses to let her story fade into silence. This memorial is our promise, our pledge to carry forward her legacy of bravery and truth, ensuring that she is never forgotten and that no other voice will ever be lost in the shadows again.